Hey there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate you being here. So this one's gonna be about writing a murder mystery. All right, so if you're not familiar, I basically have a YouTube channel where I talk about life, and this past New Year's Eve, we did a New Year's Eve party / murder mystery. So let's talk about that. Some people seem to really like it, and I figured it'd be a good conversation worth talking about, because there are a few crucial points that are probably worth knowing if you're gonna try to write your own murder mystery. So for starters, first and foremost, always try to make sure you have a good theme. So theme is really important, especially if you have people who like to dress up. That could also help. So you might have a really exotic, crazy idea for that type of I guess I shouldn't use the M word on YouTube. If you have a whodunit mystery, there we go, that's probably better. If you're trying to write a whodunit mystery, try to get it something that people can actually dress up for. So it helps get in character and make sure that whatever your theme is something that is doable for a dress up type thing. So you might have this cool, crazy like space exploration kind of thing and alien planets, which could be really neat and intricate, but it's gonna create a lot of writing and a lot of character development and a lot of story environment development. So keep that in mind. Plus, are the attendees going to be able to dress up like alien monsters or whatever? So I think, so for this past couple days ago, Happy New Year, by the way. A couple days ago, this was a 1920s themed, like gangster style type of thing. So most people had the ability to dress up with some type of outfit. It's easier for guys because if they just wear some kind of a suit or maybe just like khaki pants, brown shoes, and a baggy white shirt, that could work. Me personally, I happen to own a tuxedo and I try to use it as often as I can. So far, I've used it every New Year's and I've enjoyed it thus far. So yeah, and as far as lady folks are concerned, most women I know either own a flapper dress or would love to have an excuse to go get one. So it's a pretty solid theme. 1920s, 30s, 40s, whatever, that whole era, it's great. So you can also do a lot with it because it's like the golden age of Hollywood. The Black Dahlia was kind of a thing. So there's a lot of material to work with. Also, I highly recommend putting on some kind of background music as well to set the theme and the atmosphere and the tone. So 1920s, like swing music or big band music would be really good. It's really immersive, and you can just have it playing in the background. As for my personal setup, the room was shaped in kind of a horseshoe. So it had a bar on one side, a table on the other side, with stuff that was relevant to the evening on both of them. That would be inconspicuous if like murder weapons were placed upon them, and those were, wow, I just said murder weapon in a YouTube video. Yeah, this is not gonna get broadcast. Anyway, yeah, so they were butter knives. So we used butter knives, and that was probably the most common weapon in the room. We did have a couple other firearms, and I don't own any toy guns, so they were real, but of the ones that were used, 2 of them were real broken and not functional. So that was nice. The other ones were empty, and I made sure that if anybody had one, they knew the basic 4 rules of gun safety. Predominantly, like, do not point it at anyone, keep your finger off the trigger, don't pull it out, unless if it's part of your character script. People just need to know that you have it. That type of thing. And then, of course, they turned it back at the end of the night because guns are not cheap. So anyway, I don't recommend using real guns if you can get around it. Toy guns are definitely better. But as far as the basics go, yeah, so theme's really important. Make sure it's going to be something that you can work with, that you can write about, and that if you're wanting to do a dress-up theme, which is highly recommended, just helps people get into character. It's something that your audience members can also accommodate as well. And as far as costumes are concerned, if you're like on the fence, like, oh, you can dress up if you want to, I would say either do or do not. Do not halfway pseudo commit. There were a couple people that went out and actually like bought outfits like online and had them shipped. So flapper dress and like a nice like businessman suit. Actually, I used their costumes as part of their character development. It helped me determine who their characters were going to be. And they explicitly stated like, hey, is anybody else going to dress up? Because I'd feel really silly if we were the only ones dressed up. And it's like, yeah, no, it'd be good if everyone dressed up. So made it like, hey, dress up. This is the code. And it wasn't like a, if you can, or just kind of weak language. It was just like, hey, yeah, dress up. So, and it just kind of made everybody like figure something out. So, which honestly, I think everybody did a great job. So there were two people that were kind of hard on themselves about like, oh, my costume's dumb, but it worked. So, and their characters, it worked well with their characters, which brings me to my next point. If you're writing one, make sure that the characters are relatable to the people you're writing them for. For example, I knew straight off the bat who my killer was going to be. And she absolutely knocked it out of the park, which is exactly what I expected. And I expected that the number one person who was going to figure it out was going to be her husband. And he absolutely did. And he was literally the only one at the party who actually figured it out. And that's because it was very well played. So the situation of events that played out was really, really, really good. The women's costumes on Amazon were $30 to $40 for the 1920s theme. Yeah, so also very reasonably affordable, and flapper dresses are just plain cool. Thank you, Candace. So anyway, yeah, so dressing up, theme. Yeah, okay, so there is another person who's coming. They were originally going to be a madam of the Lady of the Night. She was supposed to be like the head mistress woman, or at least like the talent scout for the dancing club or the dancing girls that were going to be performing on stage. Well, there weren't actually dancers performing on stage. Some of the other characters were dancers at this particular club. So anyway, the thing is I found out that person knew nothing about dancing and is pretty conservative. So they also had a strong medical background, and I was like, aha, this is perfect. And it was easy to play into it. So I gave them a medical background and then tied them into some of the other characters as well with a medical background relation. So the way it was perfect for me, and it was an easy layup, is first thing I did was, all right, so here's the next point, is find out who is going to be the killer, figure that out quickly. Figure out who's going to be the victim, find that out quickly, and then work your way backwards. Work your way from there. And then if you have an engineering background, this really helps, but you try to solve problems as they come up, and you try to troubleshoot as you go along. So, for example, I figured out early on, like immediately, who the killer was going to be. It's like, okay, so this person is very, very quiet. She's a very extremely introverted extrovert. So she likes being around people, she likes talking, but she's just very quiet, and she has social anxiety, so I knew she wouldn't talk a lot. But she is good at talking to people. So that would be just enough for like, oh, they're really innocent and unassuming. Also, I know that they can be very quiet and stealthy. So I tried to take those components and bring that all together. So I decided the best way for the victim, which... yeah, so as far as, let me circle back around to that. So the victim, deciding who the victim's going to be. So first of all, figure out your killer, make sure that they're a good fit. Second of all is the victim. If you are writing this and you're going to be an active participant in it, I strongly recommend that you are the victim. It's weird if you're not, because then you're walking around like, ooh, I know something you don't, and it'd be hard to like not give stuff away, especially if you know everything that's going on, you know all the characters' backstories, you know all the other information as well. So try to make sure that either you are the killer or at least a non-participating narrator. Which brings us to the next point is, who's the victim going to be? Make sure that they are well tailored for it, preferably yourself. If you are a very loud and boisterous person, but you can also keep things to yourself if you're going to be like, dead men tell no tales, just make sure that you're not going to talk about it or say anything post-mortem. Just make sure that, that you're going to be a good fit as a victim. If you're very quiet and timid, then a better role would probably be a narrator type position. And you want to pick someone who's loud and boisterous, and then make them the murder victim. And if you're going to go with that route, I strongly recommend making them have a motive to want to out someone else in the group, which is the other thing I want to bring up. So the next point would be try to make sure everybody has some kind of a motive. Like, could they have done it? But not everybody. At least I would say 40% of the audience. So shoot for 40% of the audience would have some angle of wanting to out either the victim or at least someone adjacent to the victim. Or not proximity adjacent, but like character arc, story-wise. Like the victim's like best friend or spouse or overbearing brother, something like that. So make sure that is the case. So as far as I'm concerned, I can be pretty loud and pretty demanding, so I could fill in that role, not an issue, and I could circumvent the need for a narrator. Having a narration, like setting the theme, setting the story, setting the tone, that probably would have been good. I didn't do that. Instead, I did like a, hey, welcome to my Christmas party. I didn't want to spend Christmas alone. Or, welcome to my Christmas party. I thought it'd be best to spend Christmas with my closest friends and family, but I didn't want to spend Christmas alone, so I decided to invite you lowlives instead. And then they all kind of got a chuckle about it. And it helped set the tone, like, we're not friends. We're just business associates, business acquaintances. And it helped establish that there is not like a sense of camaraderie between me or literally anyone else in the room. So I feel like that helped, and a narrative would have been good, but it would have slowed down the game and been a lot of extra work. In some situations, especially if it's not like a universally understood, like 1920s gangster, I don't need much of a narrative, because if I say that, people already have enough of a narrative in their mind to know what to work with. So, but if I'm going to do like some kind of medieval fantasy, then I probably need to have a narrative. I probably need to have some kind of explanation of what's going on between kingdoms and the royalty members and the jesters, their backstory and all that kind of stuff. So think about that kind of stuff. Which brings me to my next point, character connectivity. Make sure that every character is connected to at least two other people. Two different people, preferably. If you can get like a spider web situation figured out, that'd be great. Try to avoid like triangles, like these three people know only these three people and they don't have much connection to anybody else, because that's where you wind up with kind of like little social bubbles, and it's not as good as bringing them in. So make sure you're trying to get everybody connected to everybody else in the group. Give them a reason to talk, which brings me to my next point. So it's good to have a bio of the character. So basically character's background, their story, a little bit of their history, a little bit of why they're there, and also try to splice in as much of motive as possible. So that's something that'll give like a baseline for your character, for your players to work with. For my particular group, most of the people that showed up I know are, for the most part, they're pretty creative and would enjoy like acting or improving and taking enough information to work with, and then developing that and having fun with it. And I told them that straight up, like right off the bat, like, hey, your characters have a baseline. Feel free to ad lib, feel free to add more, as long as whatever you ad lib does not conflict or directly contradict your bio or some of the dirt that you have on people. And the next bit is having dirt on other people. So basically have what I like to do, and I feel like it really helped with interconnectivity and mingling, is every player had two pieces of dirt, or had some kind of dirt or inside information on two other players. And it was unique to them. So only they had that set of information. And if somebody else asked them about that, they would be up to the discretion of the player to either divulge that, and if they did, how much. And it allowed for extra layers of role playing and deciding like, hey, am I gonna say this to this person, or am I gonna say this to this person, and whatnot. Another thing I added, I wouldn't say this is like a good point to include or not include, but for me personally, we had small enough of a group. I think it was only like 12 people that showed up. So it's only 12. I was very thankful it was 12 people, because in my mind that was a lot. That was 12 individual character scripts I had to write, which took me almost 2 full days to do. So with that, I felt like it was a small enough number. It was like 20, 30 people showing up, but it was small enough number to where each person could have their own unique individual player character ability that was relevant to the story, and gave that power some kind of impact and ability, but also it helped make sense for their character as well. For example, everybody showed up with everybody was assigned at the beginning if they had a weapon or not, and what that weapon was. One of the characters who played the part of the door guard, who literally, like, he stood by the front door, he showed up early to the party, so that way when anyone ever came in the door, he literally like would check their information, they asked their name, handed them their character card along with the weapon that they were assigned. And he had, his special character ability was, he had a little notebook that had everybody's name and what weapon they arrived with, if they arrived with a weapon. So another character's ability was the Madam. So the Madam basically knew everything about everybody, but would never actually directly share any of that information with anyone. So instead, her character ability was she had a little booklet as well, and it had the name of every person at the party, and who they knew dirt about. So basically their name and then the 2 people that they had dirt on. Another person was a bartender, and their special ability was they had dirt on 4 people instead of just the 2 like everybody else at the party. Another character had the ability to force another player to give them their weapon. In fact, that was the killer's. So the killer's special ability was, first off, they arrived to the party without a murder weapon, and then their ability was to force another player to give them their weapon. So I felt like that was a nice little touch, which brings me to my next bit is figure out the aftermath of the weapon. So if you're going to do something like a gunshot, I highly recommend trying to keep the guns as consistent as possible, unless if you know everybody at the party knows little to nothing about firearms. If they know little to nothing about firearms, then go nuts, do whatever you want. But if you got people who are gun nuts like myself or other people that were at the party, literally one of the questions asked. So during the murder scene, I was giving a monologue where I pulled out a Colt 1911. I did not ever put my finger on the trigger, or did I ever point it at any person. So those are 2 crucial things. So it always stayed on, pointed away from people, and I pointed it at the ceiling as if I was about to lower it to aim it at someone, and then someone hit the lights, and then everybody moved, which is another point. So sorry, I felt like important housekeeping. If you're using real guns, again, I cannot stress enough, never point them at anybody. Always keep your finger off the trigger. Always make sure that they are loaded because there's no magazine in them. And you've also personally checked to see that there's not a round chambered into it. Anyway, so during that time, the lights went out. I said bang really loud to indicate that a shot had gone off. So if you're going to have firearms, do like say a loud bang or something, or the person who is going to be pulling the trigger, make sure that they're the ones to shout the loud bang. I mean, I guess you could use like a firecracker or something, but that would be impractical and timing and I don't recommend it. So just have that person say bang. And then from there you can just kind of have fun. If there are gun nuts present, they will potentially ask what caliber was fired or what type of gun was shot, because if there are different types of guns, that will help them narrow it down. In this case, like immediately one of the first questions was, oh, where's the gunshot? It's in the ceiling. What size hole is it? Because there was a shotgun, a 22 rifle, 380 Walt, basically a 9mm, and the Colt 45. So the person who was being asked the question was a crooked cop, like detective or whatever that was on the mob payroll. He had no clue, and I had to tell him it's like it's 45 ACP. So that way the other gun people knew which gun was fired. That way they knew it was my gun that went off and it didn't actually hit anybody. So the type of death I chose was a knife. And that did a couple things. So one, it makes sure that anybody carrying a gun is then eliminated. And that's where you want to start working backwards. So if anybody has a gun, was potentially on the chopping block for, like this person, you want this person out. We know you have dirt on them, and we know you want to take them over and kick them out of the business. So it makes perfect sense for you to kill them. You only have a gun, you don't have a knife, and you're on the other side of the room. Clearly it wasn't you. So you want to come up with motive, availability, and murder weapon, and try to figure those out and then work backwards from there. Sorry, I meant to preface with that. So motive, make sure your killer has a good motive. In my instance, I made sure that they had 4 motives. Almost everyone at the party, actually at least half the room had motive to want to take my character out for whatever reason. So either I was mean to him, publicly humiliated him on multiple occasions, they were kicked out of the club, they were disgraced, treated him like trash, they were feeling like my character was not doing a good job running the business anymore and it should be someone else. Wide gamut of reasons. So lots of like, hey, this could potentially be the killer. Hey, this could potentially be them. So then that brought them to the next question. The natural next point was, well, what was the motive? What was the murder weapon? So in this case, it was a knife. Everybody used butter knives. By the way, butter knives are fantastic, especially if you have like a whole bunch and they're the same style, or at least similar style. It was awesome because you have all these very, very similar looking murder weapons, and it's hard to pin like who had what. So that's when I wanted to introduce, okay, what happens with the murder weapon? I told the person who killed me to give me the weapon, basically like drive it into my character's heart and then walk away in the darkness. So in this instance, the murder weapon was still on me, and I had another character take the murder weapon off of me, and I left it up to their discretion to either pocket the weapon themselves or to leave it on the body. Now, in this instance, in hindsight, that might have been a bit of a risky call. I probably should have either told him to take it or told him to leave it instead of leaving him up to the option. And if giving him the choice, he needed to have like a couple days to think about it along with his entire character script. That would have been better, which is another point I want to say. Is everybody arrived at the door and then got their script once they arrived. It probably would have been better if I had emailed each person individually, privately, about a week ahead of time. That would have definitely been better. The challenge with that is sometimes if you do something a week out, when it comes day of, people just might be like, hey, you know what, I couldn't make it. Things came up. And then you have like a keystone character that is unable to make it. Which that literally happened in this instance. So one of the key characters ended up not making it last minute, and it still worked out because that character was similar enough to another character that one player took on both roles and adopted like a split personality. So that is something you could work with as well. If somebody doesn't show up, try to give someone a split personality, like just in case if this happens, and try to coach them on how to navigate both the characters without giving too much of anything away. That could be a challenge. So anyway, so that's my hesitation between writing scripts ahead of time versus handing out the door. If you're going to hand out the door, make sure it's not a lengthy script. So all of mine, actually, I'll just go ahead and show this. So I'll go ahead and show you exactly what I had. My last bit before I get into that. Motivation for wanting to kill. What was the murder weapon used and our availability, and what was murder weapon use. So think about who's standing where in the room. And that's another thing I did. I wrote in the character script, like there will be a special event that triggers. When that triggers, stand at this location. So try to be as explicit as possible. So for example, I told someone, stand in front of the or stand to the right of the TV. Another person was told to stand at the wall with the painting. Another person was told to stand to the right of the table, to the left of the bar. So everybody had like very specific, explicit directions on where to stand. So availability is probably going to be the trickiest thing. So this will be the hardest part to navigate. And that's why I wanted to make sure there was opportunity for the killer to get in, do what they needed to, and get out. So when the lights went out, there was another trigger word or another trigger point that said, when lights go out or when this happens, do this. So start here. The next line was, do this. And everybody had a task. So nobody was left out. Everybody got to do something. That was another thing, is try to make sure everyone feels included. Everybody's doing something. Everybody has something to say, somewhere to go, something to do. That definitely helps make them feel involved, and it helps escalate the tension, because they're focused on like, oh my gosh, I need to not screw this up. I need to do this thing. So while all the chaos is happening in the room, they might not be as paying close attention to who's the murderer, what's going on, because there's so much chaos, which is more fitting because in a real life situation, there's going to be a lot of chaos and nobody's going to be like, somebody's about to get killed. I need to study everybody's movement. So that's not going to happen in real life. So anyway, so it adds an element of the chaos. So for me, I had to do like a flight path on who was going to move where. And if anybody was going to be stationary, I needed to make sure that their visibility was going to be obstructed of them seeing the killer move in, stab, and then move away. Also, I wanted to make sure the killer was able to start close enough to me to be able to move in quickly, and then end at a point that was further away and had multiple people crossing paths without colliding, which is another thing, is make sure you know the timing. Make sure you know the timing of where everybody is moving and when. So if someone has a long distance to travel, and somebody else can move from one spot to a similar spot that they're going to end up, as long as it is shorter distance, that should be okay. They will probably not collide mid-course, especially because the lights are going to be out. So it wasn't pitch black, but it was pretty dark. So anyway, so motive, murder weapon, and availability. Yeah, make sure whatever the delivery is of the murder, of the killing blow, it is not going to clearly isolate one particular individual. So for example, the murder weapons with a knife, she started off next to me, but there were two other people who were also in my close proximity who also had a knife. Actually, technically there's three, but one of them didn't show up. So 2/3 people. Then I realized like everybody on the other whole half the room is going to be scot-free. So I decided to have two characters that were known for being good at throwing knives and it's going to have one character actually throw a knife. Well, they didn't physically throw it. They just put it on the floor and slid it over. They were told what direction to slide it. Make sure not to like hit anyone or cause anyone to trip. So, and they did that, and it actually became a whole thing. So anyway, try to obscure as much as possible, but make sure that there are enough factors pointing at the killer to where it's like clearly them. So for the killer, literally everything in their bio pointed towards they wanted my character out. So publicly humiliated. It was they would better the world. Their very close personal friend was immediately being threatened, and her life was being threatened. She had a knife to her throat. And then also she wanted to basically start a new life with someone she loved, but couldn't because my character was still was still alive and living, and keeping that character like tied to the mob. So anyway, so she had plenty motive, like all her bio and both bits of her dirt made it look like she definitely wants my character out. So I made sure that there was no question whatsoever that it could have been pinned on her, but because I knew her personality, I knew she's really, really clever, and I knew she would not volunteer too much information. So she played it really, really well, like really, really well. So the last thing was, where's the murder weapon going to be? If it's a gun, you can get away with that. You just need to make sure the bang is in the correct part of the room with the lights out, preferably. If it's going to be something like a knife where it's close proximity, make sure you know who's going to be around the person that got stabbed when they got stabbed, and where's the weapon now. So I knew she was going to start the party without a murder weapon. That way it wouldn't show up in the guy's list. She needed to acquire one midway, so someone was going to say, hey, I gave her this weapon, and then where is it now? So she came up with this thing where the table, I was next to a table, and that table had a bunch of snacks on it on purpose. I wanted there to be knives over there. And she said, oh, I was just cutting a donut and I left it over there. And that was it. She was completely off scot-free. No one gave it a single second thought after that. She wasn't even accused during the final rounds of voting. So that was so clever, I didn't even consider it. So whoever your killer is going to be, try to make sure that it's someone who can think on their feet like that. And it's something that she just kind of said offhandedly. I don't think I'm not aware if it's anything that she actually premeditated. It just kind of worked out that way. So anyway, I just want to show you some of the stuff that I ended up doing. Cursor, there we go. Is that showing up right? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so here we go. Oh, I had a photo in here, but it's not in here. All right, so, oh, here it is. Yeah, so this is me. I just died. Here I am on the floor with so the person I had my knife to, I had my knife to her throat. I told her in her description, while you're being held captive, pull out a knife. So she had a knife on her person while my monologue was going on. So they saw she was immediately next to me and had a knife. To the left of the guy, the doctor. So the doctor was the one who checked on me. Also, it was the killer's husband in real life. And I knew he would figure her out. So I gave him, his character's special ability was flexible faction on if he wanted to try to find the killer or to cover for the killer and do what he wants with information. And his character was a very conflicted character because he had a Hippocratic oath, and he wanted to help as many people as possible, which is true in real life. He's actually like that. He's a chiropractor in real life, by the way. That is his actual like work clothes. So, anyway, I knew he could easily work with that, but also I know he knows his wife very, very well, and he also knew that the stab wound was directly in the heart between the ribs, so he's either extremely lucky, especially in the dark amidst a bunch of chaos, or the person knew exactly where to put a knife. So they probably had a strong killer background with knives, or they had a medical background, which narrowed it way down to only 3 people in the room. Actually, technically 4, because one of them was amazing with a knife. If you count the guy who's good at throwing knives, that would be a 5th, but he still had his knives on him. So anyway, so that was that photo. Took one for the team. But yeah, here's a general layout. So, oops, wrong screen. There we go. So this is how I did it. I decided to do 14 or 16? I thought I did 16 point font. 14. So, all right, so I did 14 point font because it's a little bit easier to read if you do the normal like 11 or whatever. It's a bit too small if you're trying to read in a busy room on the go. Also, it kept it more concise. I had just a character bio, And then I had the 2 bits of dirt. I made sure to italicize the person's name, who they had dirt on. That way it's easier to be able to look, quick reference. Also, I made sure that the person they had dirt on, their name always started first. And I did the person's real life name and then the code name in parentheses, in quotes, and tried to make it sound like some kind of mobster name. Next was the weapon that they start off with and a little bit of brief history background on how proficient they are with the weapon. That way I did not have to put it in their bio. Then I did the special ability, which was unique to every character, like I said. And then I did what their instructions were, where they needed to stand, what they needed to do at the beginning of the event, and then as the event was playing out, where they needed to be, what they needed to do. And then as a last twist, I decided last minute I was going to have a faction where it's not just everybody's trying to figure out who did it, but half the room is trying to figure out who did it, and the other half the room is trying to figure out who did it and make sure they don't get caught. So I think moving forward, the next one's going to be a steampunk masquerade dance ball type style. And it's going to be, I think I'm going to implement, every character has to find the killer and also complete a mission in order to win the game. So every victory will be an individualized victory, and they'll have to both complete their objective, their mission, and figure out who the killer is. So that's pretty much what I got for now. Really thank you. Oh my gosh, this went on way longer than I was expecting. So sorry for that. But yeah, hopefully this will give you some ideas. Quick tip, highlight, come up with a theme. Make sure everybody can accommodate that. If you're gonna dress up or not, make sure that is also clearly stated and followed. Also come up with enough individual characterized stories where it can tailor to each individual player who's gonna be there instead of just generic characters, here, pick a role. People like it if it's tailored and catered to them specifically. Also, if it's a creative person, try to give them a lot of open-endedness where they can improv. If they're not very creative, try to give them as much detail and specifics as possible to help them out with that, or give them lots of information on other people and encourage them to go talk to others. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, one last little bit is make sure you have find out the killer, the victim, and then work your way backwards, trying to problem solve on what questions could arise and can you address that well enough to where it's not clearly going to be one person, but can also like potentially be others, and that could cause a lot of debate and a lot of discussion amongst the group. And I highly recommend that being a standalone section to where everybody in the party is arguing with each other, trying to figure out, you did this, where were you, and do that kind of stuff. It's a lot more engaging and interactive. So anyway, that's all I've got, and holy cow, this is a long one. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much if you watched all the way to the end. Please subscribe if you want to see other random tidbits. Let me know if you've ever done a murder mystery and what was your favorite theme. If you'd like to join my next one, if you happen to live in Indianapolis area, I will gladly have you on board. Like I said, it'll be a formal masquerade / steampunk. So kind of kooky. So anyway, that's all I've got. As always, stay classy, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.